Good morning. This is the third week of the class Science to Humanity. My name is Jaeweon Cho. And this week we are going to discourse about care as opposed to concern, the following the previous topic, the fact and truth and the risk. So today I would like to bring the special topic, the paper published in a journal, if you don't mind, into this class to discuss about the care and concern, based upon the previously discussed understanding of a fact and truth, and as well as the risk as opposed to danger under different and difficult conditions, as the environment to understand the future, based on the past as environment we already discussed last week. So first week we discuss about the fact as something that exists around us, so that then we can observe sometimes to obtain the reality based on the categorical understanding of the concept, and we have the special belief to get at the truth. So depending on our different belief and so thinking to obtain the different truth. So we consider somehow, to some degree, accept the other person's truth, but we can discuss, and sometimes truth may be misutilized to insist the fallacy or misunderstood knowledge, actually, to get at the concept sometimes. The last week we discussed about risk. So risk, once again, has the different options for us to select over our own wills, intentions, different the purpose, and more importantly, with a different meaning. But as opposed to risk, we have environmental danger. So where we do not have any selections, any option to be selected by us. So the past is environment kind of. So could be entangled and mixed with the present options to get to the future. So with a different probability to occur, which can be defined as a risk. So we bring a couple of different dimensions. The first time, through past, present, and the future, materials, so such as technology. We can use technology to obtain the various options. So the more materials, then we have a more opportunity to select. In society, we can communicate to deliver the meaning through sign to be selected as true. So today we are going to discourse care as opposed to the concern. Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring this special article and paper into this class to discuss about the care and concern based upon our previous discussions. So as you probably well know and recognize from the media all around the world, especially in Korea and Japan. So the Professor Mark Ramseyer from Law School of Harvard University published an online version of his article paper with the title of Contracting for Sex within the Pacific War. Please look at his title for a second. So he emphasized the contract emphasize country instead of victims or slavery with the sex. Even under very harsh condition of the Pacific War with the Japan government and army, but he would like to stress, emphasize, contract. Okay, so I think personally, I think we should be very careful not to react and respond to his article in an emotional way. But we already discussed in this class with the topic of science and humanity, then we can use our rationale, our cool reasons and the very in rigid, cool, and rational ways. Because we are scientists, we are engineers, we are business persons, we are philosophers. Sometimes we can be artists to deal with a lot of problems in an artistic way with the mingled, interwoven, the complex concept of science as well as philosophy. Okay, so once again, this online version of this paper published the 1st December 2020. But please look, so once again, I'd like to ask myself to be as reasonable as possible. We have to be very cool, not to respond and react emotional way. Okay, so we have the victim of a so-called grandmother. Yes, so some of them already passed away, some of them still alive. So suffer from these types of attack from government, and even from these types of academic work. Why? I'm not sure why he or other persons use these types of academic discussion, the academic format to attack. I'm not sure that's what their exact the purpose and objectives are, but I have to be, or you have to be, very reasonable to respond in the cool and the rational way. So that's why I bring two different cartoons. The first one, we have to console our grandmother in reasonable way, in a scientific way, but emotional way as well. But to respond to these types of fallacy, these types of publication, academic in a special academic journal, the publisher, we have to use the cool down, rationalized, okay, so the sharpness, based on our concept and the knowledge. That's why I brought these two the cartoon. Okay, so once again, the title is Contracting for Sex in the Pacific Ocean. Was the author J. Mark Ramseyer from Harvard University. Okay, so what a surprise. Okay, so then please look at the keywords: the prostitution and indentured servitude. So indentures actually embody or employ the contract, okay, to work as labor instead of slavery. So he seems to insist those victims are not victim, but the woman, the victimized woman, so attacked by authoritative actually violence with the sex, work for and to earn a certain money, to get a salary with based on based on this contracting under these indentured servitude systems. So he continuously insisted law systems and service systems, economic systems. So he even brought the game theory as well. But he referenced his own paper published a long time ago. He used the game theory with the title of so terminology of basic and elementary. So he showed his kind of the bad use of these academic words, so using basic and elementary. So please use this. He intentionally show us and suggest us to use game theory based on what? Not complex, but basic the theory. This is a basic theory, he said. Okay, he also, in abstract and conclusion as well, insist so the women at that time, so was able to escape with the freely from the situations, have to pay back all the debt, because he insisted the women actually ask to be paid in advance with a certain salary. Okay, please look at. So I'd like to discuss with you, so to find out as many the fault, as many policy, as many error with the fact, not the emotional attack. I don't want to emotionally attack him because that's not the appropriate way at this time. So he said that the first in page 5, I'd like to bring these issues. So he said that sections and 3, section 2. So for the recruit in Japan and Korea, recruitment of the prostitution woman, he said, okay, his definitions in Japan and Korea. In Korea, so please look at this sentence. I highlighted one. Let me read it first. Note, however, what this problem was not. It was not that the government, either the Korean and the Japanese government, forced women into prostitution. It was not that the Japanese army worked with fraudulent recruiter in Japan and in Korea. It was not even that recruiters forced and the army to come to the station. Instead, the problem involved domestic Korean recruiter who had been trickling young women into working at brothels for decades. Can you find any fallacy and erroneous evidence in this sentence? There could be many, but I'd like to the one very important the fact, which is erroneous, which is absolutely erroneous. From the history. So at that times, the Japan Empire invaded us to colonize Korean Peninsula. And therefore, there was no Korean government at all. The Japan at that time, Empire at that time, not the present Japanese government, the Japanese person, but Japanese government at that time as imperialisms, as empire to invade the Korean Peninsula, did not allow us to use Korean language. Okay, so there was no Korean government, but the Mr. Ramseyer insists many places So Korean government recruit, Korean government use some kind of industry of prostitutions to recruit women to send them to the war, the frontier. Okay, this is a fake. This is a fake effect. But of course, he used just one places within France's Japan controlled the Korean government. But many other places in his article and paper, he used without any the further explanations the Korean government. But this is not. So there was one Korean government in Shanghai, as you know, the China, which is provisional, interim Korean government, right? So this is wrong. This is not the fact at all. Secondly, please look at the second, the point to be discussed with these issues. She would earn wages high enough to offset the crisis and hardness of the job and the hit to her reputation. Think of a sentence. Think of a sentence. We discussed last week what topics? Risk. Please remind of yourself what risk is. Risk, based on what? Selections. So there should be the freedom to select something. So Ramseyer is this much types of the notorious person, I believe. He intentionally use words and terminology of risk to insist, to show us, to show the people in the world. At that time, the women victimized the women, actually had the selections, had the option to select of their own will, of their own freedom, but actually not. We know that, okay? So the risk should not be used in this article. So he used this one in smooth way to show his intention, indirectly prove. He did not mention directly, but indirectly insist the victimized, the slavery women, okay, enforcedly slavery women, our grandmother select of their own the will. That's not true at all. But this is a fact as well. Okay, the risk is academic words and scientific words and sociologically the proven words to be used under different options to be selected freely with a different probability. So he used the danger as well. Okay, so we discuss the danger. So danger without any selections, right? But in workplaces, he also mentioned the danger of the war, in the war, where the fighting and the bombing and the rampant disease on the front, in the war front. But he used terminology of risk intentionally. Made a very bad utilization of this terminology of risk as opposed to danger. Okay. Okay. So contract prices. So then based on those risks, after he confirmed the women actually contract with the signature, with all conditions being informed, he insists. So then there are some contracted content with the prices, with a term of service duration at the war front. Also, he insists that there were some saving account at bank provided by the Japan Army. So he would like to show us there was some kind of a saving account, where the wages received by the Japan Army to the women has accumulated with a higher wage compared to ones in Japan, and prostitution, the market, he said in this the article as well. Okay, so there are one case, so with the memoir of a Korean case, one woman, he extracted one sentence. One of the women saved a considerable amount of money from tips. I do. So every time he intentionally used kind of confused words, based on his the purpose, I believe. Okay, please look at this sentence as well. Let me read it. But economic logic to the arrangement that the two parties, brother and a prostitute, negotiated reflected the resources and alternative opportunity that both sides understood each other. Is that true? Is that fact? I don't agree. I cannot agree. So he intentionally, he discussed many different places using the bad terminology based on very complicated terminology, such as risk, such as contract, such as the wages. So based on that, he would like to bring the logics behind the contract, based on mutual understanding of the women and army as well. And he used this one. The women understood too, that as well they could shock. Okay, so this, I believe these are based on devil types of spirit, I believe. Why? So we know that terminology understand from a philosophical aspect. The Kant used this terminology in his book of Critics of Pure Reason. We already know, and I show you the last 2 weeks when explaining the concepts. So we have to use terminology of understanding. We have to understand to get at the concept. So what he used, Mr. Ramseyer used, the women understood. Do you think they understood? Please consider their ages at that time. They actually acknowledge, they understand contract. Please consider that their ages lower than 20s, at highest the early 20s, on the environment and the circumstantial environment of the Joseon dynasty at that time, and the Confucian, the cultures. Probably they never experienced a contract. They never heard about the contract. But I'm not sure if there is the single document of a contract. But if any, even if any, I don't believe they understand contract, the paper, document, what that means. But even they enforce the women to bring to the war front as a slavery. Okay. So once again, he used the game theory. He made a reference of his own paper, published in 1991. I didn't read this one. I don't want to read anymore. But he used a credible commitment logic, and game theory. Okay, do you know game theory? But he used the game theory so to explain in an explicit way, based on his misused the words of basic and elementary game theory. Okay, to explain contract, indenture systems, under law systems. So system theory, with the system theory, so to speak. So at that time, in Lee Dynasty and Joseon Dynasty, do we have enough understanding of a system with the law, with the economic, with the social communication? No. Especially the women less than 20, they never exposed to that types of systems. So he continuously mentioned the victims understood. Okay. Can you recognize his intention? Okay, in summary, indentured servitude, based on the contract, is not logically right, as well as not the fact as well. Because I believe we discuss, the fact is believed to have to occur in the existent way. The fact is, the fact should be something that exists, but the contract does not exist, even with the document. Okay, even with the document. I'm not sure there is a document, but even with the document, the women did not recognize existential importance and the significance of a document. That's the fact. That's the fact. Okay, we have to be very careful not to be utilized in different way by Mr. Ramseyer. He's a smart person, devilly a smart person. He used or pretended to admit that there is no document, but we actually insist that this is wrong based on no document. But what if someone actually finds single document of that? So everything changed then. So we have to be very careful. Even with the document, this is not fact, because contract should be significant to the women. Secondly, the contract cannot be discussed using his own theory of a game, because he referred to his own paper. This is actually self-poesis. He did not refer to other paper except his own paper, published in 1991, that I already showed you. The victim did not and could not understand what they are going to face in the waterfronts as a slavery. Considering their ages less than 20, at highest early 20s, and under circumstantial environment. Okay, the emperor, Japan Empire, authority, Japan government and army have done the violence, not the contract, with this system of economic and services as well. Risk with the victim is not appropriate terminology to be used by any scholar in this type of inexchangeable victim, inexchangeable despair, inexchangeable the frustration of the humankind, because we are human. Okay, he seems intentionally to abuse it because he's a smart person, devilly smart person, to be able to have to have an ability to use a lot of terminology, seemingly academic, seemingly reasonable, but actually not. Lastly, there was no Korean government at all at that time, but only provisional Korean government existed at that time at Shanghai and China. We know that, but the Ramseyer continuously used the Korean government, recruit or sent the women to the front, the slavery. Okay, so of course we care because we are human. We care all the way around us, things around us. So we care our grandmother who have been suffer from this tragedy from the Pacific War. We also care because they are still suffering from the trauma, suffer from the what these types of a certain government, a certain scholar, okay, interpret their victimized the memories in different way. For example, in this paper, in this article, through contracting the system with services, for example. But we may have to concern the beyond care. Care is not enough. We have to concern because we study as a human, as a scholar, as a scientist, engineer, and a business person. Because we have to be smart, smarter than him, smarter than the ever demon with the fact and truth. Because then we have to study, we have to discuss, we have to communicate each other to get at real truth, based on very strong facts. So to find out the fallacy types, erroneous fact, which they would like to use to explain their logic based on their game theory. More importantly, in both rational and scientific way. Otherwise, we actually show our anger based on our feeling. Sometimes we have to, but in this class, an article way, so other than we have to be different to confront with this one, with our the valuable fact and the correct fact and the warmest truth. Mark Ramseyer is using his logics of game theory on the different systems of the law, because he at the faculty of law school from Harvard University. It's one of a very famous university, and his truth based on his belief. He believed a different way from ours. And I've been working as a co-editor of the journal in engineering sector under Elsevier publishers. So my colleagues in the journals have nothing to do with this the paper, but I still respecting my colleagues in that journal. But my role as a co-editor with the contract with this publisher, Elsevier, so that's why I stepped down and resigned this week. Okay, so I've been waiting the publisher actually cancel his paper from online, but the publisher, as I told, they continuously confirm they would like to, or they are going to publish the printed version as well. After the giving Mark Ramseyer 5 weeks of repeater to the comment from the world. Okay, we know that. Okay, so this is it today. So thank you for your attention. So once again, I really ask you to read this paper to find the fault, to react to his article in which way? Rational and scientific way.